Hi guys, it's me ChazRHD and welcome to tonight's live stream. Hope you guys are all doing well after, of course, the last Grand Prix in Saudi Arabia, which was a few days ago. Obviously, as I got into during my coverage on the back end of the coverage of the race in Jeddah, wasn't the greatest weekend, but we look ahead, of course, to the Australian Grand Prix, which is, in a way, the final race before I won't call it a mid-season break, but an early season break, because of course between the Australian Grand Prix and the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, which is the race after Australia, there's a 4-week break, I think. So yeah, not great, of course, but Australian Grand Prix hopefully should be a bit more exciting. But we have got still some topics and some analysis to get through before we get to Melbourne. Great to see all you guys here. Hello to all of you. No matter what time you're watching, let me rephrase that. No matter what time in the world it is in your part of the world and where you're watching from, I hope you're all having as best a day as possible. And I hope you'll join me in discussing tonight's topics. And yeah, tonight's topics are going to be: should F1 change the regulations to stop Red Bull? I will get into in a moment why it would be, in my view, quite frankly, stupid for F1 or Liberty Media to change the regulations to stop Red Bull. And also, we're going to get into some quite big news at McLaren and big technical overhaul of the technical department at the McLaren team that hopefully, maybe in the second half of this season, definitely though for next season, we'll see the McLaren team in a much better shape and definitely fighting more towards the part of the field that they deserve to be fighting at. So yeah, we'll get into that as the second topic. But yeah, the big main topic tonight will be: should F1 change the regulations to stop Red Bull Racing's dominance of 2023 and really, I guess, Red Bull's dominance that started in the second half of last season. I will just quickly remind you guys, I will be recording it, that topic, to upload as a, say, smaller video on Monday. So, you know, if certain people can't catch all of the topic I'm about to do, they can obviously go back and watch the smaller video and catch up that way. So yeah, just letting you guys know about that. What else did I want to say? Yeah, make sure in the live chat as we go along to let me know your thoughts. Do you think that regulations should be changed up to stop Red Bull? If you think so, let me know why. I'm very interested to hear your reasons as to why. If not, again, let me know why. And with McLaren, when I get into their technical department changes, yeah, let me know whether you think it will actually be a good thing for the team and see the team go in an upward trajectory. I really do hope it will see the team go in an upward trajectory. But before we get properly started here, let's one thing I want to do, yeah, quickly before we get started, is I just want to get or update you guys about the channel schedule and the next couple of live streams coming up on the channel. So yeah, the next live stream after tonight will be the Australian Grand Prix weekend preview next Thursday at 8 PM UK time. I'll be live. And then the qualifying preview, I'll be live for that on Friday, the next Friday, the 31st of March at 6 PM UK time. The reason I'll be live at 6 PM rather than 8 PM is because obviously the following morning, Saturday morning for qualifying, I'll have to be up very early for my qualifying stream. So yeah, I don't want to be up too late on Friday night next Friday. I can bring you, a good qualifying coverage for the Australian Grand Prix. So yeah, those are next two live streams on the channel. And of course, next Thursday, I will update you guys as to what the, what the exact full schedule is for the entire Australian Grand Prix weekend. And we'll get into all of that obviously towards the back end of next week. And I just want to say again, don't forget, have I said it in this stream already? I don't think I have. Make sure to smash a like button if you haven't already, obviously to help the stream. And if you do enjoy the content here, then yeah, make sure to smash that like button. But we are now going to get into the main topic. So we'll go across to these Red Bull pictures. And yeah, I think we will just get straight into it, guys. So with Red Bull currently dominating Formula 1, it has been talked about in the F1 community in the last few days. Should Formula 1 change up the regulations to prevent Red Bull dominating this season and maybe next season and the season after? Now, in this video, I'm going to get into why, no, we should absolutely not change the regulations and why it would be pretty stupid, actually, to do so. Now, the first reason why is because it would ruin some of the positive things about the current regulations. Because even though, yes, Red Bull are very dominant right now, you know, if you exclude them, it is pretty close throughout the rest of the field. I mean, if we go to the results of qualifying in Saudi Arabia, if you take out the two Red Bulls, this is what the top 10 would have been in Jeddah. I mean, a second covering, you know, Ferrari, Aston Martin, Mercedes, Alpine, McLaren, and Haas, that is pretty close. We've seen in the last few years the gap between these certain teams be quite a bit bigger. And I don't think, even though Red Bull have got easily the best car, there is no doubt about that, I don't think that we've got, you know, a boring field. I think what we've got essentially for this season is a similar situation, similar field to what we had back in 2020, where, of course, Mercedes at the time had easily the best car, but then after them, you had a close fight with Red Bull to a certain degree, Racing Point, McLaren, Renault, Ferrari when they weren't, you know, absolutely terrible. AlphaTauri occasionally would be up there as well. And I think this season is going to be similar to what we saw in 2020. And 2020 wasn't that bad of a season at all. You know, we didn't get, you know, loads of great races, but we got loads of great moments. And the battle behind, say, the two Mercedes and Max Verstappen was very, very exciting through 2020. And we had definitely a few very exciting races. So I don't think we're going to have just a very boring 2023 season. I think if you look beyond the two Red Bulls, I think things are going to be pretty close and pretty exciting. And if we go to a certain couple teams, such as Aston Martin, who have improved obviously quite a bit, with these regulations and the cost cap and also the ATR that, you know, states that teams who are lower down in the championship have more access to the wind tunnel. They can have more wind tunnel runs than the teams higher up in the championship. It does give those teams lower down in the championship more of a chance to close the gap and rise up. And with Aston Martin, yes, of course, Dan Fellows finally designing his first full Aston Martin car and coming from Red Bull with obviously knowledge of the Red Bull concept for these certain regulations has helped. But without Aston Martin having that extra access to the wind tunnel compared to the front-running teams through last season, I don't think Aston Martin would be in as great of a position now if those regulations did not exist currently in Formula 1. And just to state the, you know, incredible gain from Aston Martin from the start of last season to this season, you can see it here. Their gap to pole position in the first race in 2022 was 2.2 seconds. This season, it was just 0.6 of a second. And again, a lot of that, yes, is because Dan Fellows has had a great effect on this team, applying the correct concept for these regulations with a side pod and that. But if the top teams were allowed to develop their cars as much as they wanted and throw, 500-600 million pounds at, developing their cars, Aston Martin would not have closed the gap in the way that they have. And now, of course, Aston Martin themselves, they've got a lot of money, but they wouldn't have been able to close this gap without the regulations currently in place helping the teams lower down the championship to rise up through the field. And then, the only team to benefit from that, you also have the Williams team, who started 2022 as pretty much the worst team on the grid. And because by mid-season last season they were last in the championship, were allowed, quite a bit more time than other teams to continue developing their car. And as we have seen at the start of this season, that has really helped them, put them into a position where they are solidly a midfield team and could quite easily finish, say, in 7th or 8th in the championship. And, you can clearly see with this data here, Williams, compared to the start of 2022, have made quite a bit of progression. They were 2.1 seconds off pole in the first race of 2022, 1.7 seconds off they were at the start of 2023. So again, you can see a clear gain when, again, if we were back in the old era of Formula One where teams could spend as much as they had, Williams probably would not have gained on whoever was the front-running team from one year to the next. That probably would not have happened because, of course, we know about Williams's financial troubles, but because of these regulations, it makes it possible for Williams to close that gap. Not, absolutely massively, not as massive as obviously what Aston Martin have done, but it is a good thing for definitely those midfield teams to try and bring those teams up to the level of at least a Ferrari and Mercedes currently. And if, Red Bull don't really get, much better in the next couple years, then the gap naturally should come down between Red Bull at the top and the teams below them. Not necessarily to the point where Red Bull, will start losing championships, but the gap is going to continue getting closer and closer from the front of the field to the very back of the field. There is absolutely no doubt about that. But, for me, in terms of the way the regulations are at the minute, I don't think they should be changed. I think, the cars can still follow pretty easily. I know there were some complaints that the cars definitely feel harder to, harder to follow compared to last season, because obviously of the technical directive, I think, to a certain extent from last season, and also because more downforce is getting bolted on to these cars. But I still think the cars are pretty, the ability to follow another car, which is, the main reason these regulations are brought in to make it a lot easier to overtake, it still seems to be fine. And with the sliding scale, aero testing regulations, I guess you could call them, I think it's working absolutely fine. And with the cost cap, I think it's pretty much working out okay. It's just that Red Bull have really got these regulations correct. But there has also been this call, not just from, say, one person, but multiple people in the F1 community, that, there have been examples in the past where F1 has stopped a dominant team from dominating too much and for too long by changing the regulations, when that isn't necessarily the case. Now, this is an example of what I'm talking about, and I'd say this is this tweet from Aldas is revisionist to a certain extent, because in 94, 2005 and 2021 there were regulation changes and they did slow down those certain teams, but they weren't necessarily done to slow down those certain teams. And I think we need to clear up how or with certain regulation changes in the past, how, not all of them were to slow down or stop domination from continuing in Formula One. For example, all the way back in 1993, of course, Williams were dominating Formula One. Back then, you had obviously active suspension, traction control, launch control, so many driver aids. And Williams really were the masters of all of that stuff, and that's why they were so dominant. But the reason the FIA and Max Mosley decided for 1994 to ban all of that stuff was because they believed that it was making the cars too easy to drive, and they wanted the drivers to have more of an element in the performance of the car itself, rather than the cars just being computers, or being able to not really have or need that much input from the driver itself. And yes, that did obviously hurt Williams because they were using so much of this innovative stuff. Obviously McLaren were using it quite a bit. I think Benetton may have been as well, and maybe some other teams. I can't remember exactly who was and who wasn't back then in 1993, but I think we need to clear up that it wasn't purely to stop Williams' domination. It was to stop these cars back then becoming so easy to drive compared to how they used to be, say, in the late 1980s. Now, if you go forward to 2004, because obviously the regulations did change for 2005, new aero regulations, and obviously rules to do with tyre usage as well. I think you could definitely say, with the new regulations stating back then for 2005 that you had to use one set of tyres for the entire Grand Prix, I think you could definitely say that that was designed to hurt the Ferrari team, because as Ross Brawn actually said, who obviously was with Ferrari at the time, he said, I think in 2005, that the Bridgestone tyres back then were designed ideally for 20-lap stints, and they weren't designed to be super durable. So, of course, it hurt Ferrari quite a bit in 2005, and that's why Ferrari, the only race they won was obviously the infamous 6-car race at Indianapolis. But also, a big reason why the regulations for 2005 were changed is because the cars in 2004 became so unbelievably quick that the FIA, Max Mosley, who of course was the president, decided to try and slow these cars down, which they had done before, a few years before, back in 1998, as I'll get on to in a moment. But with 2004, if you go look back at that season, so many lap records are being set. The pace difference between the 2004 and 2003 cars was incredible, and the 2004 Formula One cars are still some of the fastest cars in the history of Formula One. And to slow the cars down and make them obviously more safe, they decided to cut the downforce of those cars. And it wasn't necessarily about absolutely stopping Ferrari from dominating even more than they already were. I think, again, with the tyre regulation changes, yeah, they definitely were designed in a way to hurt Ferrari, but again, the cars in 2004 were so quick, and, the FIA had already set a precedence before of, when the lap times got too quick, they tried to slow the cars down. Like I said, if you go back to 97, 98. In 1997, the cars got much faster than they were, say, a couple years before in 1995. And it was decided that for 1998 to, for safety reasons and to slow these cars down, they would change the technical regulations quite a bit. They brought in grooved tyres. They changed the aero of the cars quite a bit. And yeah, the speed of the 1998 cars compared to the 97 cars was quite a bit slower. And again, it was done for safety reasons. So I don't think we can necessarily say that with, the 2005 regs that Ferrari absolutely all of the technical regulation changes that year were to stop Ferrari, because even back in 97, which was an incredibly exciting F1 season, because of how quick the cars were getting, again, the FIA stepped in and made the cars safer. And, we're not necessarily just trying to stop a team from dominating, at that particular time. One era, though, that I want to get into is 2014, because this is also mentioned as a regulation change that was, designed to stop Red Bull, which again is not necessarily, mostly true. I mean, it is to a certain extent. I think you could definitely argue, but not absolutely 100%. Because in 2014, obviously, we had the new V6 power units come in, brand new technology, a massive thing for Formula One, massive change to Formula One. And these V6 hybrids, the reason they came into Formula One was for road relevancy, and obviously with this technology, being pushed by all the major car manufacturers, this is what they wanted in Formula One. Also, I think Formula One wanted to attract other manufacturers to the sport by making Formula One more relevant to, or more road relevant than it was in the V8 era. And remember, Renault, who of course were powering the Red Bull cars in the V8 era, were one of, if not the main proponent, pushing these regulations coming into force for 2014. Of course, they got it massively wrong. With the aero changes, though, I think you could absolutely say that they were changed in a way to stop Red Bull being so incredibly good with the aerodynamic side of their car. I think you could absolutely make that argument. But again, these regulations were not necessarily put in place to stop Red Bull. It was because Formula One, wanted to update itself and it was a big push really from the manufacturers to become more road relevant. And I think even if the, aerodynamic side of the cars did not change, I still think Red Bull and their dominance would have ended, because obviously the Renault power unit at the time was, was quite bad in 2014, 2015 as well, and never really became a good power unit until, say, 2019, 2020, that type of era in the V6 era overall. And if we go finally to the final example that people like to point to of, the technical regulations being changed to stop a certain team, the final example is 2021. Now, back in 2020, again, similar, say, to 2004, the cars were getting incredibly quick, and they were pretty much at that lap record level. They were just incredibly quick cars. And for 2021, of course, the original plan before COVID hit was for, these new type of cars we've got now, for those to debut in 2021. But of course, because of the COVID pandemic, those were delayed until 2022. And because also of, these cars getting so much quicker, and Pirelli in 2020 didn't have really 2020 tyres. They had to use the 2019 tyres in 2020 because their 2020 tyres that they tested were inadequate. They requested that the speed of the cars and the load they were generating be decreased in some way, because it was just too much for the tyres. And we saw that, of course, in 2020. We had quite a few races where there were tyre issues and worries about the tyres because of just how incredibly quick these cars were and the amount of load they were putting through the tyres. I will make sure in the description of this video to put a link to an article which does prove that the 2021 regulation changes were not about stopping Mercedes. It was actually about, slowing the cars down, and for safety reasons when it came to the tyres, to decrease the incredible load the tyres were being put through. And I'm not sure necessarily it did work because, of course, at Baku in 2021, we had a couple massive tyre failures, but those are legitimately the reasons why those regulations were changed for 2021. And I guess what I've been doing in the last few minutes is proving that a lot of these regulation changes that you may think were to stop a certain team who were dominating from dominating even further, that wasn't necessarily the case. So please do remember that regulation changes in the past were not necessarily to stop certain teams from continuing their domination and from, maybe extending just how quick they were compared to the rest of the pack, especially with 2021. I think it's kind of a bit of a lie that is told towards people that it was to hurt Mercedes because, again, Pirelli, they just couldn't cope with the incredible load being put through their tyres because of how incredibly quick these cars were. So I guess this is me correcting the record, because if you go back to this tweet by Aldas, if I can find it, I mean, he states here as if it's, known fact that these regulations in these certain years were changed absolutely to slow these certain teams. When, with Ferrari 2005, I think you could definitely make that argument. But with 94 and 2021, I don't think you can really make a great case for that when you look at what, the regulations or the reasons they were actually changed, it points to something quite different. So I'm just correcting the record on, why regulations have been changed in the past, because certain people who are arguing for changing the regulations to slow Red Bull or stop their dominance are using these certain regulation changes from the past to justify it happening, for this year or next year, when, again, the truth isn't necessarily being told about these certain seasons and certain regulation changes. But my final point with why I don't think the regulations should be changed at all to stop Red Bull is because it's not necessarily going to actually work. And there's actually one great example that shows that this might not actually work if they were to change the regulations to stop Red Bull. Because if we go back to Red Bull in 2011, of course, they were dominating Formula One. They had by miles the best car with, their brilliant blown diffuser. And they were just incredibly quick, much, much better than any team on the grid. Now, of course, their blown diffuser was taken away, that they were really the best at in that era. And in the next, say, year or so, the regulations were changed in a way which I think were definitely designed to hurt Red Bull and to make things a bit closer between the field. And of course, for 2012, it did make things quite a bit closer. You can see the differences in the front wings there. Obviously, in 2012, we had the a bit ugly step noses, and the blown diffuser stuff was banned, of course, for 2012. And for 2012, it did work. Red Bull did not dominate that season. They still, of course, won the championship, but they didn't dominate the season. But then you go to 2013, and they were back dominating Formula One, because fundamentally, in that era between 2009 and 2013, obviously 2009, they didn't win the championship at all, but in that era, Red Bull, they had the best car pretty much for that entire time and could not be stopped. So even if you were to change the regulations and maybe try and stop what their strength is in a way, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to stop the Red Bull team, because fundamentally they may still have a good enough car to still win the championship, next year and the year after, and be still as dominant. It is absolutely possible. So I really don't think a regulation change necessarily, if you were to do it, I don't think it would necessarily work and actually stop the Red Bull team. Clearly, they've got the best car in Formula One, and in my view, it's up to the other teams to get with the program and make a better car, and more so copy what Red Bull are doing, because clearly what Red Bull are doing with their design works the best with these regulations. But guys, let me know in the comment section down below, should F1 change the regulations to stop Red Bull? Yes or no? If you are yes, let me know exactly why. Let me know your argument for why they should change the regulations. If not, then again, let me know your argument as to why. In my view, absolutely not. They should leave the regulations alone because, as I said, the field is closing up. The regulations are working in that sense. The only issue, I guess, is that, yes, you do have one dominant team, but for the rest of the field is closing up. And even though, certain people out there like to say that there is precedence of the FIA stopping certain teams from dominating in the past, that isn't necessarily true. And like I said, even if you were to change the regulations, it doesn't necessarily mean it is actually going to work. That's my argument. Let me know yours in the comments section down below, guys. And until my next video at the Australian Grand Prix weekend of 2023, it has been me, Chazza HD. Goodbye. And there you go, guys. That is that topic done. And let me know in the chat whether you agree, disagree. Just let me know in the chat. Do you think the regulations should be changed, yes or no? Very curious to hear what you guys, of course, have to say. And make sure, if you are new to the channel, to subscribe, obviously, for more content like this. And for everyone watching right now, don't forget to smash that like button. Let's try and get the likes up to, say, I don't know, 25 likes by the end of the stream, something like that. Let's try and get that if we can. And before I move on to my next topic, let me quickly do a poll in the chat to ask you guys what you think. Should F1 change regulations to stop Red Bull? And of course, it'll be a yes or no. So yeah, let me know in that poll at the top of the chat whether, you think the regulations should be altered in a way that, at least attempts to slow down Red Bull racing. But the final topic we are going to get onto is to do with McLaren. And McLaren, after a poor start to the season, obviously they're bottom of the championship, they have made quite a change in their technical department. So, yeah, we're going to be getting onto that in just a second. I just need to find the exact statement from McLaren because I'm going to show it on screen. So, let me just find it quick. Yeah, there we go. And right, so let me get this up on screen. There you go, and you should be able to see this now, guys. Sorry about all this latest heritage and store stuff. It's on the McLaren website. I can't get it to go away. But McLaren Formula One team announces organizational, if I can speak English, changes. So let's get into it. So it's McLaren statement. And they say, McLaren today announces a number of organizational changes within the Formula One team. The team has taken the decision to move away from a single executive technical director role overseeing the whole technical operation. Instead, it will be introducing a Formula One technical executive team comprising, of 3 new specialized technical director roles reporting directly to the team principal Andrea Stella. James Key, Executive Technical Director, has left the team as part of this restructure. So yeah, James Key out of McLaren. Let me know whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing. And then they go on to say the F1 technical executive team includes Peter Prodromou, Prodromou, just trying to make sure I get that pronunciation correct, who moves into the role of technical director aerodynamics. Peter will lead the whole aero function using his experience gained in 32 years of Formula 1 and a strong track record of winning world championships. Of course, he was with Adrian Newey during the V8 era at Red Bull. I've got to say, I'm surprised. I don't know why, but after 2018, I did not think he was at McLaren anymore. I don't know why I thought that, but yeah, I thought he left McLaren, didn't know he was still there. And then it goes on to say David Sanchez, I think that's how you pronounce his first name, returns to McLaren as technical director, car concept and performance after a decade at Ferrari, and brings significant expertise and innovation to the team. David will join the team on the 1st of January 2024. Also important to note that David, who was the technical director, I think, briefly at Ferrari. Was he briefly technical director? I'm not sure, but I think he pretty much was the technical director at the Ferrari team, I think, in the last year or so. He used to work for McLaren between 2007 and 2012, so he has worked for McLaren before. That's a good thing. And then they say Neil Holdy, I think it is promoted into the newly created role of technical director, engineering and design. Having first joined the team in 2006, Neil has grown within the organization, becoming a highly respected technical leader. Giuseppe Pesci, not sure how to pronounce that, is promoted to director aerodynamics and chief of staff to support the running of the aero department, running into Peter. And then you've got a more expanded role for the COO of the Formula 1 team for Piers Tyne, not sure again how to pronounce that, bit of a difficult name. This new role will support the team principle and the mission of innovating and elevating the standards at McLaren. And then they go on to say this reorganization has been the work of a number of months and takes place ahead of several new key infrastructure projects which are due to come online in phases throughout 2023. Additionally, the team has been undertaking a sustained recruitment campaign to increase the technical capability with some senior appointments already made. This strategic approach based on organizational restructure, new infrastructure, and expansion of the workforce creates the foundations for a stronger and more innovative Formula 1 team to enable future success. So there you go. That's what McLaren had to say. And I certainly hope everything of what they said, it does come true, because I think, obviously the big news is, James Key being let go, really, by the team. I'm not surprised, and I think it is the right decision, because I think in terms of the cars he designed for, he didn't really design the 2019 car, but he definitely contributed towards that car. The 2020 and 2021 McLarens were good cars. Let's not deny that. But, the 2022 McLaren, I don't think was that bad of a car. I think the biggest problem with it was just way too draggy. And yeah, they just didn't get that balance right between, grip and drag and all of that. I just think they just got the balance a bit wrong. And for this season, it looks as though they've got the balance even more wrong than they did in 2022. And obviously they they've made, I think, alterations to their to what the McLaren car is going to be like for this season, and that happened, I think, a bit late in the process, like Andrea Stella said, after the McLaren car reveal. So, yeah, it just wasn't good enough, I'm afraid, from James Key. And, he's had to leave the team, and I think that is absolutely the right decision. I don't think James Key will be out of Formula 1 for long, though. He is still a quality designer. I think he is still, he could absolutely be of good use to another team. I don't deny that. I wouldn't be surprised if he ended up back at the team he was at before, McLaren, which was Toro Rosso at the time and is now AlphaTauri, because of course AlphaTauri are in a bit of a tricky position with their car, so I wouldn't be surprised if he ended up back there. And I think he'll definitely be back in Formula 1, because like I said, he's too good to not be in Formula 1. But yeah, McLaren, because of the two failures of design of last year's McLaren and this year's McLaren, they had to do it, because they can't afford to be just lingering in the midfield when they're supposedly trying to get back to fighting for race wins, podiums, and stuff like that. So yeah, I think it's a good decision by McLaren, and I hope that, because obviously when they talk about the infrastructure that is going to come online, stuff like the wind tunnel, I think new simulator, stuff like that, obviously for that to have an effect on McLaren in a positive way, it is still going to take quite a bit of time from now to really happen. But I really do hope that starting really from next season, McLaren can begin that upward trajectory again that we saw from the start of 2019 until really the end of 2021, because they were in, at the end of 2021, and really throughout 2021, they were in a really good position. They were very close, or not very close, but they were close to a certain extent to making that step, to being right there with the top teams in Formula 1. I mean, if you go and look at, where Lando Norris, qualified a lot of the time, most of the time in 2021, he was, not that much slower than Red Bull and Mercedes at times. And obviously in 2021, the only teams that really developed their cars were Mercedes and Red Bull, because they were engaged in a championship fight and everyone else was concentrating on 2022. So, if McLaren could have developed their car for that season, they may have been right up there as a front-running team. Of course, they won a race that season, probably should have won 2 races that year. So they weren't very far away, is the point I'm trying to make, from being a proper front-running team. Obviously, now they've dropped back quite a bit, and they're basically now in the position they were in at the end of 2018. So it is now time for them to, like I said, begin once again that upward trajectory, whether that starts with this big new upgrade coming at the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, or if it starts late this season, start of next season, doesn't matter. They've got to start that new progression forward, because they cannot afford to just linger in the midfield for much longer. McLaren have got to be getting pretty much back to a front running Formula 1 team, and like I said, they were close to that in 2021, but just got the they just got the design wrong for the new regulations in 2022, and that's really what has set them back into the position they're in now. So yeah, such a shame. Hopefully we'll see McLaren in a much better state very, very soon. But guys, those are all the topics I wanted to get into. Let's get into your comments now in the live chat. And let's see what you guys have to say. Darth Lord Raven says, actually, it's the game to be the fastest. That's what top sport is. What about the dominant years of Mercedes, even Ferrari? If Red Bull did a better job, that's it is what it is. Exactly. Polish Eddie says they allowed Mercedes and Hamilton to be dominant for 8 years, so why would they try to slow down Red Bull after just 2 races of their dominance? Yeah, like I said, it's just a stupid thing for even to be considered. But reportedly, it has been already considered. But the people running Formula 1 have also... what's the best way to describe this? They also note the fact that it is pretty hard at the minute to change the regulations, because there is no... it's not like there are current safety issues with these cars. So, we can't exactly, or, the people running Formula One can't exactly change the regulations based on that. So, it's hard for them to find an excuse, thankfully, to change things up. Eric says if that Aston Martin keeps being second into next year, and if Alonso eventually retires, will Hamilton or Leclerc or Russell try to drive for Aston Martin? If their teams keep losing, depends what Fernando retires. I don't think Fernando is going to retire, end of this season or next season. I think as long as Aston Martin now can keep as a front-running team, I think Fernando will race for them until he gets just burnt out and maybe too slow. I mean, eventually one day that should happen where Fernando is just too slow to race anymore. But as long as Fernando's, at his best, which he still is, clearly, and the Aston Martin car is still, good enough for him, then he'll be, at that team. It's hard to say. Rotten Bastard says this whole reg change has Toto slime all over it. His fall from the F1 throne has made him mental. Greg Martinez says, why does the Willies have such a miserable car? I wouldn't say they have a miserable car. I think they've got a pretty good car, actually, this season. Especially compared to this time last year. Darth Lord Raven asks, do you think the relationship between Checo and Max will snap this year? You can already feel something. Maybe it will, but I don't think it'll actually affect anything. The simple fact is Max Verstappen is going to win the championship, and unless Verstappen is hit by incredible amounts of bad luck, there's nothing Sergio Perez can do about it because he just isn't as good as Max Verstappen. Darth Rim says, I have my arguments. If you look back, McLaren Mercedes with Hakkinen and Coulthard were dominant. Ferrari with Schumacher. The same, even Hamilton with Mercedes. There were no changes, so why change? Prank says, teams will find downforce from some place and it isn't from the floor, then it'll be increasing dirty air again. And Eric also saying they should not they would not start changing rules in football or any other sport if a team is too dominant or force them to change players or anything else. Don't see why it should be done in F1. I think another point I should have made when I was going through that topic, and it is, I think most people in the F1 community would agree with this, is I don't think we should have a situation where we have like the same regulations for like a 10, 15 year period or anything, but it is good once every 4 or 5 years to have a new set of regulations just to freshen things up and also to modernize Formula One to whatever the current type of tech and all that stuff is. So I don't think changing the regulations in itself is a bad thing. I think the bad thing is how often it happens. And yeah, I don't think, I mean, if I ran Formula One and had all the power to make decisions and nobody else could stop me, then we would only have new regulations once every 4 or 5 years. And if I was currently the boss of Formula One, I would not be changing the regulations at all until obviously 2026 they are going to change because we've got new power units coming. And obviously Audi coming into Formula One, Ford as well. Cannot wait to see them back in the sport. But then after that, I probably wouldn't change the regulations again until 2030, 2031. Like I said, once every 4 or 5 years, it is good to freshen things up and change things. But I don't want us doing like what was something that was done a lot during the Bernie Ecclestone era, which is something that really frustrated me, is new regulations like once every couple years, because it just ruins the competitiveness of the field. Because if you leave the regulations alone for like say a 3-4 year period, by the end of those regulations the field closes up anyway, because there's only you can only go so far with a certain type of car within certain regulations. So yeah, I think maybe this season, yeah, Red Bull are going to dominate, but I think next season and definitely 2025, I think things in Formula One will be very, very close. So I think, the F1 community just needs to be more patient and stop, crying and complaining because a team's dominating. Because, I mean, F1 teams dominate. I mean, what there's nothing you can really do about it. I mean, it's not even just a Formula One thing, is it? It's a sport thing. I mean, look in, football in the Premier League. You had Manchester United dominate and win Premier League titles for years and years. I think at one point, United won, 7 Premier League titles in 9 years from like 96 to 2003, I think, was it? Or was it, I can't remember, some other period, but I think they won 7 titles in like a 9-year period. Did United. And obviously look at Manchester City now. They've won, before this season, 4 of the last 5 Premier League titles. Another example would be the NBA. We've had plenty of dominant teams in the NBA. Chicago Bulls, Lakers, Golden State Warriors, the Spurs to a certain extent. So dominance happens in sport because, certain teams just, come together and end up being just much better than the rest. I mean, if you look at most sports, most sports are dominated by certain people or certain teams. Like, there's not that many sports out there where dominance doesn't happen really at all. It's just something that happens in sports. End of story. But yeah, that's my view on it all. I'll end the poll in the chat. Thank you guys for voting. And you guys voted no with 70% of the vote. And then it says 29% of the vote for yes, but it should be 30% really. So yeah, you guys think it should not. And I, like I said, agree. If you did miss me talking about the Red Bull topic, like I said at the start of this stream, it will be uploaded as a shorter video on Monday, say early evening or late afternoon, like say 4 p.m. UK time-ish, something like that. So yeah, make sure to go and check that out if you were not able to check it out earlier in this stream. But yeah, that's me done for the stream tonight, guys. Thank you guys so much for coming along. And quickly, just a reminder of the schedule going forward. So the next 2 live streams on the channel, firstly, will be next Thursday, the 2023 Australian Grand Prix weekend preview stream, live at 8 p.m. UK time. And then the day after, next Friday, live at 6 p.m. UK time, I will be live for the qualifying preview for the 2023 Australian Grand Prix. And again, the reason I'll be going live at 6 p.m, not 8 p.m, is because I have to be up early the next morning to cover qualifying itself. That's why I'm going to do a bit of an earlier stream. And also, reminder, in the UK, we are, the clocks are going 1 hour forward on Sunday. And obviously we're going from GMT to BST. So just please, if you're not from the UK, please account for that in terms of the timings of the streams for next week. But after that, it should be all good. Yeah, thank you guys so much for coming along. If you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Bottom right of the screen, you can do it right there. Before you go, guys, if you haven't already, smash a like button. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter at ChazHD5 and join my Discord server. Link below in the description for more content like this. And also make sure to join the Discord to join our growing community here. But guys, until the real start of the Australian Grand Prix weekend next Thursday at 8 p.m. UK time, it has been me, ChazHD. Goodbye.